Mike, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate your time and always enjoy sitting down and visiting with you. It's an opportunity to learn so much. As you're aware, we kind of have a program that we've put together this year where we offer this iSlicer University that allows us to send out educational type videos and literature to a lot of the snow fighters in the Western United States, and allows them to kind of have a resource to look at things that help them in their jobs and the things that they're doing. We try to make it pretty simple and pretty straightforward, but we feel like, as the days are getting longer and we're starting to see the snow wind down and the temperatures start to warm up a little bit, it'd be good to just look at maybe the winter in a recap perspective, and just looking at things that maybe we can look back at and learn from. And first thing, maybe what we could do is I know you've been with the Alaska DOT for 36 years. You were the director of the South Coast region for a number of years, and you were also the director and of maintenance. Maybe you could tell us a little bit, or maybe introduce yourself a little bit in terms of your background and history. I know you've worked with a lot of organizations like AASHTO and WSHTO, and you do a lot of trainings, and just kind of give maybe the audience a little bit of a history of your experience.
Okay. Well, thanks, Doug. Yeah, like you said, I spent about 37 years with the Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities. I actually started my career on the engineering side of things. I was designing airports and roads, and it was probably 4 or 5 years into my career, I took a position in maintenance and operations, and greatest decision I ever made in my career, never looked back. So out of my 37 years with Alaska, just, probably 30 years of that or so was in maintenance and operations. And kind of like you said, I did a lot of different positions, loved the state of Alaska, kind of was willing to move around, and served as a maintenance superintendent, airport manager. I served as their Northern Region maintenance manager in charge of Arctic operations for the department. One of the unique things about the Alaska DOT is we didn't just have road responsibilities, but we had airport responsibilities. So I got into the whole anti-icing, de-icing elements of certificated airports, jet airports and all that. Then, like I say, I worked my way up to the director of statewide maintenance and operations, where I served for about 10 years. And then I was going to retire, and the then governor at that time offered me a position as one of the 3 regional directors for the DOT. And so I did that for a few years, and then retired. And upon retirement, as people say, I failed retirement. I've been with Envirotech Services for the last about 4 years as a technical expert with them. So overall, probably 41 years of experience in the industry, at all levels of the industry, from a frontline guy to, I'll say, as a regional director, ultimate decisions on budget and resources and that sort of thing.
We'll mention that Envirotech is a national winter maintenance solutions company. They provide a lot of different products for agencies throughout the country to meet their winter maintenance needs. And so I'm sure that your technical expertise is well appreciated. So just from a winter maintenance perspective, and kind of having putting that hat on, if you look back and you come to kind of the end of the season, what's your overall general feeling? Is there a sense of relief? Is there a sense of, oh man, I wish we'd have done this or done that? What's your general feelings as you come to the end of the season, and what kind of big things do you look at the end of the season to try to evaluate whether your season was successful or not?
Well, I think it's kind of all of the above of what you said. I think, the snow fighters, just bless them as hard as they're working. I mean, long shifts, 7 days a week, when the storms are happening. So I think there's a relief because, you can actually maybe get back to some normal hours and actually spend some time with your family, at the end of the winter season. I think, I'm a huge advocate for documentation and keeping track of, whether it's equipment hours, man hours, product quantities, lane miles covered. I think, weather data, keeping track of weather data and how that relates to our plan. Were we able to follow our snow and ice control plan? Did we have to deviate from that? So again, most of us hate paperwork. Most of us, the crews, they want to operate the equipment, they want to provide safety, they want to provide mobility, but it really is important to have that document what you did through the course of the winter, because, at the end of the season, that's the time when we're starting to look at, what went well, what do we want to replicate in future winters, what worked, but we need to improve upon, and what didn't work that we want to change, our operations, our policies, that we don't want a repeat of that. So, and I think one of the other key things is it's not a one person, making these decisions. I think it's a great time. I'm a huge advocate of after action reports, just like I've been an incident commander on natural disasters where it's a standard procedure that you do an after action report. But I think at the end of the winter, get your operators together, get your mechanics together, get your procurement folks together, and, talk about all elements of winter. Were you ordering? Did things go smoothly in ordering? Did we order in time, or were we late in getting, refilling the sheds and that sort of thing? So I think there's a lot of conversations that need to be had, but it may be, again, 4 months, 5 months since the first storm, and you may have had multiple storms since then. So that's where, documenting, having, whether it's a maintenance management system or simple pen and paper coming out from the drivers in the truck. I think the more information that we collect through the course of the winter, I think that helps us do a better job and plan better for the next winter.
Let me ask you just a couple of questions in relation to some of the things you've said there. Did you ever have a season where you felt like, yeah, we nailed it, went just as planned, and it unfolded just like we thought it would?
That's a hard question because, you try to predict Mother Nature, and, look at weather forecasts. How often are weather forecasts correct? And so I think there's times when, we're pretty happy. I mean, we came out on budget. We didn't have road closures, things like that. I think you never nail it 100%. I just don't think that's possible. So I think there's always something to learn, no matter how well you think the winter went. But again, I think just trying to predict Mother Nature, I can't imagine that, we got all the weather forecasts and everything right every time during the course of a winter.
So a couple of things. It would seem that this documentation is really the key, because every winter is going to be different, and you can fall back on a lot of different things that you've documented or experienced, and I would guess too that the key is really gathering as much information as you can, and probably from a lot of different resources, and listening to the guys that are out on the plows and out in the field and in the different regions, and their feedback and input probably is very valuable as well, I would suspect.
Oh, yes. I mean, the guys in the truck, I mean, they live it. They're out there. They know what's happening. Every storm is different. Every snowflake is different. Every road is different. And, these are the guys that are out there every day. They know the roads. They know how the product is responding as they're putting it down. I take it a step farther than even just the maintenance crews and the supervisors. Talk to the police departments, talk to the transit companies, talk to taxi cab companies, school buses, because these are folks, again, that they're out there almost every day. It's important for our kids to get to school. And so was our timing appropriate that our plows were in front of the school bus because the school bus was leaving at such and such a time? Maybe we missed that the school system changed and they started a half hour early or something like that. So again, I think it's really important to broaden it beyond just your agency or your company, but look at those that you're actually serving. If you're a government agency, you're serving the public. So I think it's important to reach out to those and, were we successful? Were you able to get to, your to the school every day? Was the ambulances able to get to the hospital without interruption? So I think that as broad a, area questions that we can put out there, I think the better planning will do for the future.
So looking at levels of success and did you base it on service levels? I mean, I know certain agencies have service levels that they try to attain. Was it based on budgets? Was it based on road closures? What was kind of, from a priority perspective, the most important aspect in determining success in your winter season, and how did you grade yourself?
So, let me just say, a lot of agencies do things different. Some agencies are using the viceless sensors for grip. And so they're judging, how quickly do you return to grip? So for us in Alaska, we had very well-defined levels of service. And we had a proposed level of service for every road in the state. And we had an end state, which is critical for levels of service. When that last snowflake falls, what is your end state? What are you striving for with your winter operations? And we had a time factor associated with that. We wanted, bare pavement within X number of hours, or we wanted fog line to fog line pushed back and, shoulders cleared, or we wanted traction material put down, whatever that was. And then, so we go back and, and it is, did we meet that 90% of the time, 80% of the time, 70% of the time? And so, again, Alaska, we didn't have a lot of the grip sensors that I think are great tools. So, for us, we were looking at, how often did we meet our defined levels of service? And we had our performance measures, A, B, C, D, F. And we had targets for all of our roads, and were we meeting those targets? So again, each agency, each company is a little different because their tools for, some of them are qualitative, some of them are quantitative. And so, yeah, it's a little, like I say, it's a little bit different. And for us, Alaska DOT, we were looking at how often did we meet our defined level of service, and in what time frame did we meet it?
In all that decision making and all that evaluation, how much of the time was a budget the driving factor in your decisions?
It's pretty important. I mean, you tend to have a defined amount of money that you're basically allocated for the winter. I'm big on sustainable practices. And so, budget is just essentially one of the three legs that we look at. There's environmental concerns, there's societal concerns, which is level of service. There are budgetary constraints. And so again, you have to put a lot of effort into not focusing too much on any one of those legs, because if you put too much effort into budget and kind of disregard levels of service or the environment, that's not a sustainable practice. And I think society in general is really pushing for sustainability in a lot of different areas. And that's no different than in the winter maintenance community. The sustainable practices are very important. So budgets are very important, but they don't drive 100% of the decision making, because again, we want to be cognizant of our environmental impacts, and we want to meet those societal concerns regarding levels of service expectations.
And just quality of life, the
Yes.
people's ability to continue to live during the winter months. How much of that too, I guess, in looking at that three-legged stool, that probably applies to looking at the products that you used as well. Environmental considerations and cost considerations and performance considerations. And tell me how, at the end of the season, how did you evaluate the products that you used and whether they were helpful and successful, and how did you kind of make that determination?
Well, that's a great question, and again, I think a lot of that comes from, it's both quantitative and qualitative. We had some sensors were not fully built out on the sensors where we're getting exact grip information. But again, I think, you're looking at time to get back, if bare pavement is your end state, if that's your level of service, then you have to go back and, look at how many, quantities. Were we able to get bare pavement at 100 pounds per lane mile of a granular material? Did it take us 200 pounds, 300 pounds, 400 pounds? So you have to start looking, the higher the application rate, the more chlorides you're putting into the environment. And so again, looking at the application rate, did we have to go above, what we normally want to, the amount we want to put out? So again, you want to be very efficient in your application rates. Again, and then when you're looking at the budget element of it, I'm huge on life cycle costing. And in my career was basically in government, and most governments, it's low bid, and low bid, low price up front is not always the lowest cost in the end. And so again, it's this, you have to take this holistic view of everything that you're doing in winter maintenance. So
Mike, how did you do that with the idea that, government by nature is trying to, I think, look at being good stewards of tax dollars, and they're trying to drive these low bids, but understanding that low price or the lowest price product may not provide the greatest value. How did you work with that in that system where it's designed to really get people to purchase from the very least expensive product available?
I think a lot of it's education. People don't understand. There was a reason why government agencies went to low bid. In the past, it was seen as fairness, as you're trying to be a good steward. We go with the lowest price. But I think over time we've learned that, again, whether it's de-icing, anti-icing products, whether it's equipment, whether it's paper and pencils and pens in the office, that lower price doesn't always translate. Again, I just use the example, if you're putting out, you have a product and you're putting out 200 pounds per lane mile and you're paying $100 per ton, versus if you can put out only 140 pounds per lane mile, but you're paying a little bit more. You got to look at that end result, and that's where application rates come in. But it's way beyond that. It's the tip of the iceberg when you look at product price up front, because do you have cleanup? If you're using just a sand, an aggregate, you have shoulder cleanup, you have cleanup under guardrail, ditch cleanup, culvert cleanup, storm drains. We have, there's, health impacts. If you're in a PM 2.5 or PM 10 area, dust from sand and things like that, very harmful to people that have, breathing difficulties. Corrosion on, is the product you're using, does it meet like the PNS specs for corrosion reduction? If you're using a straight, white road salt, they're very corrosive. So there's impacts on your, your infrastructure, bridges and things like that. So it's not a simple answer. Because there's so many parts, moving parts of this, but it's that education, because I think government in particular look at that low price up front. But again, that low price up front may end up, being 20, 30, 40% higher cost than something that costs maybe significantly more up front, because it is more practical. In the snow and ice world, getting that bare pavement, getting rid of that snow and ice on the road, I'll say the faster the better. We know that, safe, one of our main objectives, or our number one objective, is safety on the road. And there's, lots of literature, and folks know that if we can get back to bare pavement, it's like an 85% reduction in accidents, which means, lower fatalities, lower numbers of injuries and that. And so again, that having products that work quickly, that don't require reapplication as often. Again, I'm kind of dragging this on, but there's just so many elements of this.
It's probably hard to evaluate all the costs. I mean, the costs of road closures, the cost of, or the impact on the economy, the impact on tourism, or, safety. What's the cost on our combined, insurance, fees and things that come into play there when you have higher accident rates. And I imagine there's just a lot of costs that are hard to evaluate. But does it feel to you like agencies, for the most part, are starting to look at the broader picture and looking at the bigger cost structure in evaluating how they, how they get out and maintain the winter roads, and getting out early, using products that allow them to get to that bare pavement quicker and things of that nature?
Yeah, and I think the winter maintenance has really evolved in the last, many years. I think, anti-icing and, being proactive, getting out ahead of the storm, I think has been, it's been kind of sweeping the country, sweeping the world to some extent. And I think so, like you're saying, having those products that allow us to get out there early, prevent the bond from happening, keeping the product on the road where we want it to be, where it's going to work for us. I think, again, I think it's this whole education. I think agencies have found the weaknesses in a lot of, again, just the low bid, going with the cheapest product. And again, it's not just the, an anti-icing, de-icing, there's graders that a lot of us want to order, and we know they're going to last longer. There's less mechanical breakdown. They're going to work better. They're going to use less fuel. And so again, in the de-icing, anti-icing world, it's, having those products that work quickly, having those products that reduce corrosion, that aren't going to have the impacts on our infrastructure, having products that not only work quickly, but have a sustained action on the road. And that's, if you have a granular complex chloride with, a good gradation, then you have that fine material that brines quickly, and you have larger material that continues to brine over time. So again, these are all things that winter maintenance professionals need to keep in mind, because storms have varying durations. And so, I mean, these are all things we have to take into consideration.
How easy is it to justify the added expense of, say, pre-wetting a product, for example, where you have a granular product and for the most part, you've got 100% active material you're putting out on the roads, but pre-wetting, you're adding cost to that. You're increasing the cost of that, whatever you're putting out per lane mile. But how do you justify that added expense?
Well, again, I think it's that thing that you pre-wet material, and I am a huge advocate for pre-wetting because by pre-wetting, you are minimizing bounce and scatter. And there are a lot of studies done by DOTs that show if you pre-wet material, you can keep about 30% extra material on the road. You're minimizing the loss. A lot of non-pre-wet material, especially if it's a uniform sized material, comes out of the back of the truck and a certain amount of it bounces off past the fog line and it's really not doing us any good. So by pre-wetting, you can reduce the application rate, which is, you have to do that on the truck. It doesn't happen just on its own. So if you're going to go to a pre-wetting program, you change the application, the amount of material coming out of the back of your truck, there's anywhere from a 20 to 30% savings on pre-wetting. The other thing that, folks that do anti-icing and using a granular material has to be wet before it starts working. It has to go into a brine. So by pre-wetting your material, that basically 100% active granular material, the second it hits the road, the smaller material has now absorbed, has been pre-wet with water. It's going to brine instantly, and you got product working on the road. And then as the snow and ice is melting, again, over time, that starts turning the larger material into brine, and it starts working. So again, just, lots of elements, lots of moving parts in the anti-icing, de-icing world.
How frequently would you do it after each storm? Would you sit down with your crews and with the leads in the sheds, sit down with the crews and evaluate their taper logs or evaluate storms on an individual basis and look at the unique aspects of those storms and say, hey, this is what we're learning here. This is what happened here. This is where we had a challenge, or maybe this didn't go quite as planned. How often would you do that rundown and evaluation?
And I think that's something that should be done every storm. And sometimes that meeting may be, 5 minutes. Maybe things pretty much went to plan. And we got the melting that we wanted. We got the weather forecast that we needed. We met our defined level of service. But there's other times, again, probably more often than not, something didn't go right, timing wise or application wise. And so I think even if that requires a half hour, whatever, a considerable amount of time dedicated to that. That means if you come across that same weather pattern, those same temperatures, both pavement and air temperature, and and maybe you now know you need to tweak your application rate by X pounds per lane mile, or we need to be out there 20 minutes earlier, because we needed that extra time to get that material into brine to actually start preventing that bond. So I think it's a really good idea. And again, it doesn't have to be a full-blown, long, convoluted meeting, but I think it's really important. And I think it's important for supervisors to get that feedback from the folks in the trucks that are seeing it happening in real time.